It is a sales feature now for me and not a deterrent. And if somebody thinks it's a deterrent, then I don't want to work there.
Welcome to Broadcastability, a podcast by, for, and about workers with disabilities and inclusive workplaces. It's part of the Proud Project at the University of Toronto. You can find out more about the Proud Project on our website, theproudproject.ca.
This podcast was recorded and produced on the traditional and ancestral territories of the Huron-Wendat, the Seneca, and the Mississaugas of the Credit River. We would also like to acknowledge the other Indigenous lands across Turtle Island, where we conduct our research and record this podcast. Miigwech. I'm actually really excited by this conversation because she's just such a delightful person, but she has such strength of character, I think, too.
Yes, she's extremely positive, and it's no wonder she's a motivational speaker. She has that experience, but I really loved how she was talking about skill set, that she focuses on what her skills are when she goes to an interview rather than her disability. When your disability, something might look like it's a disadvantage, you have to really change the conversation to what your advantages are.
I really, really liked her clear understanding of the workplace. She's had such diverse experience that she really understands in different modalities what accessibility is, like what inclusion is. She's experienced it. She knows when it's happening and when it's not happening. And it's not necessarily about whether it's in a big physically accessible building. It's really about the nature of people's attitudes and the culture in the workplace.
Yes, that really stood out for me too, is her discussion around what an inclusive culture looks like. I think one of the things she has to share with employers is to how to create that culture.
And I think that she makes it less scary. She seems to appreciate the world around her so much that she makes it easy to come into her world.
Well, I am a BC girl. I'm one of the few, it seems. Live out here in Vancouver, born and bred, and absolutely love it. Traveled quite a few destinations around the world, and also have a degree out of UBC. Was living a full life. I was married when a slight car accident on one of my trips kind of changed my life. I was 30 years old and traveling in Venezuela in the middle of nowhere on what was going to be an awesome 4-day trek to fish for piranha and hang on to some anaconda and sleep in hammocks and do some crazy things. When the first day, the driver, we were in sort of what you would consider like a mountain road, missed a corner and drove off the mountainside. So it was a small tour. We were just in an SUV. I was sitting in, if you can imagine, 2 fake seats in the back storage area of an SUV that, side saddle kind of thing.
Yeah.
Vehicle was rolling and I was ejected out at the back and broke my neck and did a bit of a whirlwind trip back to recovery. Was living a full life until the age of 30, and then I had to recreate myself and figure things out. And the most amazing thing with travel insurance is, one, don't ever leave home without it, even on your day trip to the US. I did not get any bills, nothing. And the only bill we received was our ambulance ride, which is from our airport to VGH, because our BC Med doesn't cover it. Pre-accident, my main job, I was working at a coffee house. I was living in northern BC in Terrace. My dad wanted to always have a business. And since I had arrived up there after university, we did it together, and he bought it, I ran it, and we worked together. And I was always with the employees. I was always having to be bad cop, and he was good cop. The little happy-go-lucky manager who walks in the door, and I'm like, Dad. So when I had the car accident and needed to recreate myself, the only main job waitressing positions and doing other things through university, my main reference was my father. So you
Right.
can't really do that, even though I was managing a restaurant, basically. Not so great to start off with. That's the only serious, employer to talk to.
What did you have your degree in? I mean, that I'm sort of thinking about your resume, your
Yeah.
degree, and
Yeah.
dad as referee. And by the way, I'm disabled.
Yeah, nutritional sciences. So biochem of the human body, basically,
That's cool.
is what I took. Yeah, I didn't know about dietetics until I got into school, and I would have gone in that direction. I really believe in finding something out of schooling that's employable. I don't want to do 4 years. I don't regret having a degree. I just want to have one that gets you a job at the end of it. And a standard science degree doesn't really normally do that, and you have to continue. And I had chosen to go back to university after a 4-year break already. So I'm like, oh, dietetics, let's do that. Awesome. Employable after 4 years. But oddly enough, in those days, it was a different faculty at UBC, and I tried, you couldn't switch faculties. It was a nightmare. So nutritional sciences, BSc, basic came out. So I would say that, it didn't direct into a position per se, but it has always helped me step up at any job interview. And they were never related to my degree ever.
Right.
Later on, as my adult years continued, but showing that you were self-directed and focused and, be able to do all these things gave me a step up over other people. So I honestly wouldn't be where I am today without a couple of amazing donations that were separate. A friend of a friend brought this fellow into my life and wanted to help me. And I couldn't have gone to play sport where it was located. I couldn't have tried to find or go to the workplace. I would have needed a much more accommodation around things like that. He bought me a van straight out about probably 6 months after my ex left. This came into my life, and he just wanted to help. I understand he had some difficult background himself, and he's starting to sort of turn his life around, and luckily had made a ton of money and wanted to help where people didn't help him, and outright bought me a $30,000 van with the ramp and the whole bit. Like, amazing that having the transportation is huge for people with disabilities, getting to places, keeping warm. So having that van in my back pocket changed my direction.
I think you're right. Transportation makes such a huge difference at all levels. You talk about going home. It seems to me in some ways you were lucky there and how that worked out as well, because so can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So friends and family took it upon themselves to raise a bunch of money. They had a huge garage sale up in Terrace. By this point, I was down in Vancouver, rehab. I actually never did return to Terrace after the accident. It just didn't make sense to go back to a smaller community. Metro Van has so much going on that we decided to stay. My ex was also from North Van. So, and my mom and sister had, funny enough, ended up in North Vancouver. So North Vancouver it was going to be, but the friends and family that were up in Terrace, they raised $20,000. And then I know that their friends and family down in Metro Van put some money together as a donation as well. And we got used it as a down payment for an apartment in North Van. And in the day of 2000, it was before real estate went crazy. So it was an 800 square foot 1-bedroom apartment that we got for $102,000. So that was an amazing opportunity.
Big gift, yeah.
But and because at the time of the accident, to ease financial burdens, because both of us, my ex and I, had just finished university. We had all these, student loans and things. We actually had to file for bankruptcy. It was just what we had to do at the time to waive a bunch of stuff, which sounds bad, but it meant that the apartment had to go into my in-laws' name. But then, as I say, we got divorced, but it's in my ex-in-laws' name now. The in-laws were amazing. They could have, by that point, a couple of years later, sold the apartment for quite a bit more, because by that stage real estate started to increase. But all they asked me to do was, now that the funds that had been raised were starting to dwindle and they were paying out of pocket for mortgage, they said if I could take over the mortgage, then the place was mine. By that point, I'd been working already for a couple of years. And luckily, I've convinced, I don't know how I did, being that, as I said, we had to file for bankruptcy, which obviously has a huge effect for usually at least 7 years on your financial statements. But a credit union came through and heard my story and saw my capabilities from before and now. And I got a mortgage and I got to take over the apartment. But I mean, again, scary as hell, because it's now my home and I'm responsible for everything and the strata fee, and I'm proud as hell that I was able to maintain it.
I think many of Canadian cities just aren't constructed that way. You get apartments that are walk-ups, that the rooms are way too small for wheelchairs to even, like, you can't put furniture in if you're going to navigate it with a wheelchair. Like, there are all sorts of things that,
the key is older buildings.
Older buildings that have big rooms, but hopefully that have good elevator access. They don't always do, and they don't.
It broke down. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
We'd been viewing a couple of apartments up until then, and by that point I was crying, because they were just these awful normal apartments with short little balconies that had the 6-inch step to get up and over. I was never going to be able to get outside to the outside area, and to me, just being outside was so important. That just, again, fed my spirit to have fresh air and feel sun on my face. And if I wasn't going to be able to do that at my own home, then in accessible living, there's a balcony that you can only stare at, because they didn't think about the zero threshold access. In this one particular place that we walked into for the viewing, I could just see it. It was such an amazing ground level apartment, huge outside deck, patio. Yes, it had the big lip to it, but my ex-father-in-law and family were very handy, and without asking strata, we lowered the patio door, which was common property, to as the level of outside, which still allowed for a 3-inch step up from the inside, and we just ramped it. We ramped it from the inside.
Just going back to that idea of having energy, and you told us previously about the different sports that you've played. And to me, that's kind of a theme, and quite a few people we speak with, is that they have either taken up different sports, or they continued with the different kinds of activities pre-accident or post, or just throughout their lives, right? So how does sports factor into your life?
So I honestly wouldn't be where I am today without sport. I was always sporty. I wanted to figure out what that looked like now. I was hiking, and I wasn't playing traditional sports. I was a figure skater growing up, and just stayed fit. Well, sort of. I was 30 and forgetting about working out my arms and stuff, but whatever. The pictures of my travels in Venezuela showed me I really needed to figure that out quickly. But while I was at GS Strong, there was a sign called Have a Go Day. BC Wheelchair Sports here in Lower Mainland and SCIBC team up together now and have these awesome opportunities. It's hard not to want to get involved, or you almost have to choose not to get involved with all the things that are happening now in this world. But there was this poster about a Have a Go Day and tennis. Now, I wasn't a huge tennis player, but I played it now and then. And as a quad with funky hands, I had a limited choice of sports. But here I go down to the gym at GF, And I'm seeing people in these fancy fast chairs and they're swinging their rackets. And I'm just like, oh, get me one of those. I can't even move out of my chair right now, but get me in one of those. And they, strapped me to a tennis racket and there, right away I was trying to figure out how to play tennis. And then funny enough, later on was another poster at rehab about the tennis program that happened to be in the municipality that I was living in at the time. So honestly, it was boom, straight out of the hospital. I was attempting to play tennis. Like at that stage, I could barely push down a hallway in my manual wheelchair. So I wasn't doing much on the tennis court. The coach was open enough to lift me into the chair, helped strap to the racket because, obviously I can't really hold onto the racket. So how do I do that? A shit ton of hockey tape wrapped around and around and around my hand so much that I lose circulation. And then I have to now push around a court with a club in my hand, taped, to chase a stupid yellow ball. What was I thinking? I don't know. It seemed fun. Still does. But what it did was just made me work out the muscles that I had. It's not that it was going to open up anything below my level of injury, but what it did was maximize what I had left. And if I hadn't gotten into sport in that way, I wouldn't have known all the abilities that I could do now. I was, it made me so much stronger for my day-to-day life and mentally. For me, sport is about what it brings to your life. And I know that not everyone can play sports. So it's finding something that feeds your spirit. Sport was that way for me. And that was awesome for my life. But if it's knitting, if it's a chess club, it's about getting out and meeting people. And it's about ability, not disability, and intermingling and being social, because that is so difficult when you're transitioning from rehab hospital, about perfect environment, to home, where all of a sudden you're isolated. So, it's finding somewhere that you can do a bunch of things. I wanted to step back also and talk about what tennis brought to me, because I was not going to be an Olympic athlete, and yes, Olympic athletes can be inspirational and you see them on commercials, but as some of your paperwork was, that you sent me show, it's hard to relate sometimes. And I never related to people that went to the Olympics. I was never going to go to the Olympics. I am short and dumpy, and I could barely push my chair around the tennis court, but I had a hell of a lot of fun doing it. And I had this coach that encouraged me. And the first time nationals were local, he said, do it, just go. And I'm like, why? Like, I'm not competitive. Because it's not about that. It's about doing it. So they were actually in Whistler. It's the first time I'd ever traveled with disability. And I'm like, how do I do this? When I use help, I use gadgets in the bathroom and stuff. And over time, so that was my first time trying to do it away from home. I learned more and more. And then I decided to go to nationals the next year. And that was in Ontario. And I had this epiphany. Oh, there's people with disabilities all over the world. So if I need to get a gadget or a commode chair, I can actually rent one where I'm going. I can get the stuff brought to the hotel. I don't actually specifically have to travel with it. If I didn't have it at the time, I do now. But I pushed myself with the support of this tennis network to learn more and do more. And finally, when I was done with using all my vacation time for tennis, I wanted to travel. But now I could wrap my brain around how to deal with my body in the bathroom. Now, I wasn't an idiot. I wasn't going to go down to Venezuela and try to do backpacking stuff again. That would be, well, I miss it. That would be fun. But now I travel to all-inclusive holidays.
Right.
And I don't want to source my own food in some small towns. So somebody can get my own food. But there's a lot that tennis brought to my life that extended further. And it's been brought awesomeness to me.
Tell us about some of your other employment experiences. Like you have quite a diverse and a robust career. And that was the other thing that we found really interesting to talk to you about, those different workplace experiences you
I
have.
was always learning, right? My first learning experience after disability, because there I was 30, I didn't want to live on this assisted programs that the government provided. It wasn't enough. I had been, I was traveling. Look, I was traveling with the accident. I'm going to movies, going to dinner. I wanted that life again. And unfortunately, with the amount of funds that the government gives, if you're not able to do that, then it's, you weren't able to, get back on your feet and get back to work. It's not a lot. You can't have a lot of fun times.
It's not enough money. I mean, that was what happened with CERB, is they gave $2,000 a month, and yet people with disabilities are required to live on $1,100 a month. And that,
right.
It just shows it's just not enough.
No, absolutely. So I was like, okay, what do I do? I'm going to step away from that funding. Scary as hell as a brand new quadriplegic with funky hands that, don't type properly or as quickly, and note taking isn't as fast. But as you can see, I have the gift of the gab, and can potentially sweet talk my way, and learned how to do skill set versus just the tasks. I think that was the biggest learning, and where my ability to change career paths and do different things has been, is one, I can explain how my skill set is relevant to that present job. And at the same time, I've also been able to, find employers who are absolutely open to understanding skill set.
What do you mean by skill set versus task? Because that's a great thing.
So here, latest job is program assistant for stroke services. So I'm basically admin. And they knew that actually they have a talent department, and I was brought in as a project coordinator. And so I can coordinate different things, and that is such a general topic, and that's because of my previous jobs.
In our previous interview, you talked about accommodations and having to deal with that and ask for them. But yet what you said previously about skill set, you're right. It makes one think of ability in a different way. Mm-hmm. So not focusing on your disabilities, which we all have some, but focusing more on skill set, which is concentrating on ability. Mm-hmm. So I love that. Tell us a bit more about how your views of accommodation, maybe, or your, when you had that first interview after your injury, it sounds like it would have been a very different experience than this most recent set where you had everything on the table and were very open and frank. How has that evolved?
I didn't know what I could and couldn't do without hand function. I had my typer gadgets, which I didn't bring to show off, unfortunately. But I have two typers that just basically hold my two pointer fingers out. And I can 2-finger type as I go along. And I have a very similar type of gadget that slides onto my right hand. Basically, it holds the pen versus me holding it. And it's very simple task. So I can type, I can take notes in a pretty decent manner. I had those pieces before I even started looking for work. I truly believe you need to take responsibility for yourself and your accommodations initially, know what you need in general before going into the workplace. Because if you know that about yourself, about your needs, then and work on that conversation, in your head for interviews. We always been told to prepare for interviews. Well, not just those behavioral questions that come up of what is your best thing? What are your least things that your weakest parts? I'm like, those are the normal questions. But when you have a disability, there's another level. And that's where I think it's important to talk about what you need in the workplace ahead of time versus if it becomes performance review later on if you haven't disclosed what you need to make you a successful workplace. That is key of learnings over my last 22 years. If you don't need an accommodation, great, that's fine. But if there's certain things that you do need, if you need a bathroom door lightened so that you don't kill your shoulder, then talk about it. There's not many people that maybe not the job interview, but later on, as you're first getting your first visit to the office, that you have to talk to your manager about going to the bathroom. But it's a reality for my life anyway, that I need to make sure that somebody can, hey, come with me the first time. Let's check this out so I don't get locked in here.
So on the application, do you actually disclose? Do you disclose in your letter or not?
It has varied. In the beginning, I chose more to only disclose if they're federally regulated because of that whole, there's a bit of a not quota thing, but if you're federally regulated, you have the whole laws that you do need to be more open to hiring people with disabilities. But if it's a smaller company, then I didn't actually do that. Oddly enough, though, later on, talking to a good friend who is immersed in education around employment and disability, it's more that smaller businesses hiring people with disabilities over the big guys, over whatever study that showed that the small businesses hired more likely. Yeah. But nowadays, I actually did more than not put it in my cover letter because it's a sales feature for me. Look at what I've done in the sense of problem solving techniques, the good, the bad, the ugly that has come to my life, and I strive, to move forward and keep on learning. It is a sales feature now for me, and not a deterrent. And if somebody thinks it's a deterrent, then I don't want to work there. Because I remember one of these jobs that I got a call back immediately. Because disability now is all over my resume and all of the volunteer things that I do. And now that I do speaking engagements, I have it listed as well as one of my, top jobs. So I'm like, can't really hide that I have a disability now, even if I wanted to. So the fellow I was just trying to get, it was a part-time admin position. It was on the North Shore here. It's going to be like 5 seconds from my house. Got a call back the moment I hit send on Craigslist. And we start talking. And he's like, so you have a disability? One, I could call him on what he just said because you're legally not allowed to ask that question. But I'm like, okay, well, yes, I do. I actually, I admit, I normally just tell people I use a manual wheelchair for mobility. If you say quadriplegic, I understand that that's scary as hell. In most minds, that's no arms or no leg function, because that's what I thought too. So I admit I do that. I don't mention my hands because I need accommodations around my hands. I have my own typers and my pen. I know that now I can keep up to speed. So I bring them to an interview because face-to-face interviews, I think it's important to, as I said, don't leave anyone guessing. Don't, people are going to make assumptions, and they're a lot of times, better or worse, if somebody doesn't know about disability, they'll think it's hard for you, hard for them. How do we make this all work? Because maybe they're open to it, but they can't wrap their brains around it. So they're, if they have one choice of a hire that seems easier than you, then they might go with the easier choice. So I bring my little typers into the interview to show that I can type and write, and just take that conversation and worry out of the hiring process. At least I think it's important for me that when I'm the jobs I'm looking at are jobs I can do. For one, yes, the reality is I'm in your face with a wheelchair. So that's where I do also make sure that I speak about any needs that I may have and ease the conversation on how I do certain things so that people aren't going away guessing. But the main focus is ability, not disability.
So I'm intrigued. When you've, your resume is impressive, and I think you're right now that you've done a lot of things. Your disability just speaks to how capable you are. But at the beginning, it wouldn't have. But because your disability would have been the first thing they saw, right? No matter what your resume said.
Yeah.
Plus, your reference might have been your dad, which might,
Yeah.
might not have been great. But I'm thinking, given your experience, can you give us a sense of what, the difference between what is truly an inclusive sort of work environment versus what isn't?
I had a really great experience when I was in the IT department at a clothing manufacturing company, and they were so open to bringing me in. It wasn't about ticking the box for them. I was up against this other hire. It was equal, to whomever was going to get the job. And luckily I knew somebody as well. And that she actually walked my resume over. You know how that, I don't remember the percentage, but if you get a reference from somebody in an office place that works there already, you have a much better chance of getting a job. So that's how I really got my foot in the door there. But I had been in a number of other places where, I wasn't really, I felt like I wasn't included in the fun. So you can come into the workplace, you can get your job done, your abilities can prove themselves and you do well. But what about the fun aspects of work? The water cooler talk when you go for your coffee, even sitting in the lunchroom, chatting up people and parties, social occasions and team building things. I felt like that's where I was sort of left out in many situations where I couldn't make my own coffee or tea because they never figured out a way to help me do that for myself. I had to have a little teapot at my desk. I didn't get to go and chat up people at the lunchroom because one, there was this huge heavy door in between that they didn't mechanize. And
did you happen to ask them to or not?
Honestly, actually, they eventually worked it out and they put the button on the door and everyone used it because big cameras had to go through it. And it was amazing now that they could roll $100,000 cameras through a door that all the cameramen could press a button. But for the longest time, it wasn't. And there was no way I was blocked.
Right.
So, I mean, there's infrastructure gets in the way of the desire for things as well. But going to the really positive workplace where, there's one thing when you see people go for lunch all the time, and that negative position I felt was on the corner of Robson and Burrard. Like there are restaurants galore and
that you could have got into.
Yeah, right? And everyone's going for lunch and I was never invited. And I did chat to people. It wasn't that I was, keeping within myself, but it's like most of them didn't know what to do with me.
Right.
But now I have this different position a few years later. And right away, the staff were like, hey, we go over to commercial. Like they drove off the North Shore to go for lunch. One, I thought that was crazy, but I'm like, hey, I'll get in on that mess if that's we're allowed to do that. And so a bunch of the people would jump into my van as well when we go and do that Thursday lunch. And what was amazing to me is when it came to team building, a new climbing gym had just been developed in our strip mall that we are in. And the staff, the IT department wanted to go to the climbing gym. And I'm like, really? But actually, before they announced it, that was what was going to be the event for that year, a couple of senior managers came to me and said, okay, Alexis, this is the desire, but we're not going to do this if it doesn't work for you too. But we've reached out to this climbing ropes guru guy in Toronto. We're in Vancouver, and he's willing to talk us through how to do this. He's going to meet up with us. And I think he was going to be in Vancouver for a time. And so they met up and we played around with things. And there I was incorporated into this whole team building exercise at a climbing gym, and as a joke, I'm a chick in a chair. So that to me is inclusion in the workplace.
And that speaks to all of our EDI efforts for equality, diversity, and inclusion, because it can be a policy and it can be something, that a company might strive for, but real inclusion is about culture. Yeah, so that's amazing.
You know what you remind me of, actually, I hadn't really thought of it until you were speaking. My very first job I held, I was in a wheelchair and I was in my early 20s, and you're really unsure of yourself in a workplace. Like and I remember I had one great manager who insisted, it was an IT department again, surprisingly, everyone's, they're meant to be antisocial, but they weren't. And
Yeah.
I had a manager who insisted we all take a break at a certain time and go have coffee in the cafeteria together and just take 20 minutes. And I just presumed, because I was in a chair and I was, I was new, they weren't going to include me. No, stop, wait. Up on the elevators, they didn't take the stairs. It's about the culture that's led from the top, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And I think in that first job that I had, one, as I said, the infrastructure, the way the building was built and needed to be built for safety because it was media, didn't allow for me to interact as well. It was on multiple levels. There was actually escalators and elevators, people coming and going, and being the reception, which was my first position there. I was behind glass. That was doors that were locked. I sat right beside the security guard. It didn't help that we didn't get along. It wasn't the most enlightened and happy environment. But I mean, the few staff that would come in to say hello were definitely those who were open to people with disabilities, because if you're not comfortable or don't know somebody with disability, there is this level of discomfort of like, oh, I don't know what to say, so I'm not going to say anything at all.
Or even with a quad, I've been in and out of a chair, and yet I come across, do they want me to shake their hand? Do they want me to touch them? I don't even, and I have experienced a disability, and I still have moments of just I don't know what I'm meant to do, right? Yeah. I don't know what's the best thing to do.
And that's where you just ask.
Right.
Again, where I say, I'm tired of being asked, but at the same time, it is reality that, that, or just, hey, how was your weekend? You're just a person that's at the at the office. So, hey, how's your local sports team? Whatever you do to start a conversation with somebody you don't know, you just do that. You do it in the grocery store lineup all the time. If that person happened to be in the wheelchair in that grocery store lineup, it's no different.
You have so much wisdom to share. And I'm not sure it's clear to our listeners that you actually were doing workshops and working as a consultant in a way, so that you kind of just alluded to it with your work with UBC. So tell us a little bit about how you came how you came into doing, or how you arrived at doing that, and that work of you as a public speaker as well.
So way back when, there was a vocational counselor who helped me get my first job. And he also transitioned. He was able-bodied, but he, over the years, became more immersed in life and around people with disabilities, and had speaking engagements that he needed speakers for. So he and I always stayed connected. We were always friendly, and he would reach out to me to speak for these different employment sort of enlightening employers around people with disabilities. And so for the first 20 years of my life of disability, no, I guess it was a little less, 17-ish, I gave it away for free. Mark would call, I'd do a conference, I'd do a panel, or Spinal Cord Injury BC would need somebody, and you would just talk about it and do it. I was working in this IT department happily, full-time, great job, good money, when Mark called me one Thursday morning and said, hey, I've just been, where he was working, he had just gotten a grant to work with 4 specific employers to teach them over a 2-year span on how to be more inclusive in their hiring practices. He called me if I wanted the position. It paid a third of the more than what I was making, but for a 2-year contract. And I'm just like, that is scary as hell, but okay. I was paying a mortgage at the time, or, we had a mortgage, had a home. solo in my life. And I'm like, more money is always a good thing. So that was such a learning experience to really formalize what I had been talking about. This was where we had to make workshops for these 4 employers around disability awareness in general. We had an hour and a half course for that hour and a half course. And then we wrote one about accommodations and mental health in the workplace. And for 2 years, talked about all this stuff and really made me even more comfortable so that when people meet me, like you guys, you say I sound good or just can come across naturally with the topics. And it's because I've done it so much now. When that job came to an end and I needed to still make money, I still kept on having, well, by that point I had Barry in my life. And with a second income, I had the luxury now to pull back and work part-time. But it also meant I could still source out and try to find speaking engagements. COVID happened really quickly into that timing and kind of shut that down. I did try a couple of speaking engagements over Zoom. And I mean, we spoke about it. It's just with a little face picture, it's not as poignant as seeing me in person in a wheelchair as I speak with my hands, and they're kind of funky. And it's not as fun to over Zoom. So I actually gave up for a time, and we'll see what happens as we all transition back.
I mean, you raised so many issues there. One is, many disabled people aren't paid when they share their expertise. Many of whom who can't work or are on pensions or on whatever they are, the rules are that they can't earn money or very minimal money, so they can't even take pay. So I think that's a way of devaluing what they have to offer, and I find that really problematic. But you have thought so much about so many things. What would you advise someone who's young and disabled and heading out, maybe from university, because people are now getting sort of education. They can get educated if you have a disability, but what then? What would you advise them?
It's funny. I mean, I may have had to change my direction of employment from a stand-up point of view to a seat and be more office directed, but I don't think about it as if I have a disability before I think about the work. It's the work. If what I've chosen to do is something I can do, just go for it is all I can say. I mean, it's nothing about disability. It's about going for it. It's scary as hell. And I know that if you are in that loop of money situation, the reality is I had to step away from it and push myself and just do it.
It's very scary because some people can lose their housing, they can lose their nursing, they can lose all sorts of things, even if they make an attempt, right?
I know that I think I was at a time that didn't ding me if I made so much money, where I do have care at home funded by the government. I'm on the CECL program where the government money comes to me and I hire my own people. I believe now it's a lot harder to get on it if you actually have money in the bank.
I mean, on that basis, you say go for it. I was a young PhD student and I couldn't get a job while I was in a chair. There was no way. I get interviews and as soon as I was out of a chair, because I have a condition that waxes and wanes, exact same TV, I had offers. What should we do as people, members of our towns, our provinces, this country, to make this more possible, that we get somebody as capable as you, we get to have the benefit of your abilities in the world, right? How do we get there?
I mean, it's such a big topic. I sit on a committee that advises all 3 municipalities of the North Shore. I know that all the municipalities of Metro Vancouver have an advising committee on disability, and basically the built environment is what they're focused on, is the built environment. But if you build it, they will come as well. But I am pretty happy that on these committees, it's not just the group of people with disabilities shooting the shit and talking about stuff. There is a staff person from that municipality and a council person. The focus isn't around advocacy. You have to be careful there. It's about making your municipality better. It's getting in and talking to your government officials. Obviously, initially, we talk about top down. We have to convince the top. If that's your workplace, if that's, in speaking engagements and getting the certain crowds that you want to talk to, and government. And I think people are listening a bit more now, it seems, with a lot of the legislation that's being developed now. I mean, it's been live in the US for over 25 years. It's not perfect. It's, again, a general overlapping policy that is impossible to touch on all topics and all disabilities, but at least it's a conversation. And I think that's your starting point, is a conversation. Because until somebody is first faced with somebody with a disability, don't mean to not include you, but it's just not a part of their life, their reality. So until they're faced with it and need to deal with it, then they might wake up. Part of my speaking engagement is that it's understanding that the part of the whole life experience is disability. A natural part of life is becoming disabled. We all become disabled. If it's later in your years, or I call you the weekend warrior. You go out on Friday, plan to have some fun, and on Monday, you sometimes come back a little more maimed than you planned. Life brings on disability.
Very true. Very true.
My support system at the time of my disability, and as has developed over the years, is stupidly awesome. I know that that's a huge factor in all of the things I've been speaking about today, that brought together the right people at the right time, and not everybody has that. I don't wish disability. I don't wish a spinal cord injury on anyone, because it can fucking suck. But I just wanted to live. And in my case, you guys have asked, what would I say to new people? Just live, whatever that looks like for you.
Thank you for listening. We hope you've enjoyed Broadcastability. You can find us on the web at theproudproject.ca and broadcastability.ca. You can also find us on social media at The Proud Project on LinkedIn, Facebook, and YouTube, and we're The Proud Project CA on Instagram.
We would like to acknowledge the University of Toronto Scarborough and our podcast partner, Easter Seals Canada, for supporting the production of these podcasts. We would also like to thank our funding partners, the Canada Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council, the Centre for Global Disability Studies, Tech Nation, and the Catherine and Frederick Eaton Charitable Foundation for helping us create Broadcastability.
Broadcastability is produced by The Proud Project at Scarborough College at the University of Toronto and by Easter Seals Canada. The music in this podcast was composed and produced by Justin Laurie. Isabel Avakumovich-Poynton created Broadcastability's cover art. Jessica Gobbers edited this episode.